Hey, everybody. Welcome to uh, another episode of The Bitter Pill, as well as a joint episode with Jerry's Take on China. I'm your host, Jeff Melton, and this is Jerry Gray here. And looks like we've got six viewers so far on StreamYard. So, you know, hopefully that'll go up. So, we have a number of topics that we wanted to talk about tonight. The primary one we want to focus on, because it's obviously the most uh, important thing going on in the world right now in terms of its impact, uh, immediate impact, and it's what people are talking about is the current situation in Palestine, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And there are a number of other things we wanted to talk about. So we were thinking maybe we would start with one of those other issues while we wait for people to come in, and then we can move to talking about Palestine. So, Jerry, you had noticed that there was a shooting recently in Maine. Hi, F. Lou, how are you doing? Uh, and I haven't really been following that because I've been focused on the Palestinian stuff, and done a number of videos and an article about that, which I've linked in the video description, and I linked a couple of Jerry's commentaries on that as well, if you want to check those out during or after the stream. But anyway, why don't you go ahead and talk about the Maine shooting, Jerry, because I haven't really been following that. So.
Okay. Well, this only happened less than 24 hours ago, and I was listening live to it going on. I was on Twitter X, and I went onto a live stream where a group of people who were on the scene were talking about it and listening into police and helicopter radios. So, yeah, one thing I like about America is the transparency of everything. It's possible to kind of listen into what's going on formally and officially. And one of the things, I mean, it's obviously it's devastating. This is huge. This is it's a big city. I think it's the second largest city in the state of Maine, but Maine is not a particularly big or populous state. So yeah. This has happened inside of Maine, and it looks like at least 16 are dead, maybe as many as 25 are dead. I've seen varying numbers, 16 being the lowest and 25 being the highest, and at least 50 and up to maybe 80 people injured. So because last night, when it's now 8 o'clock in the morning here, because I was listening to this last night, they have lost the shooter, and he's gone into the backwoods somewhere. And apparently this guy is he's a sharpshooter for the National Guard. He's a trained basically a trained killer, and he seems to have gone a little bit crazy. About a year ago, he was entered into a mental health establishment because he was hearing voices and there was some danger to the community from him. And I'm gobsmacked, actually, that America is so divided on this gun law that people like him who have these skills and have the weaponry to do it, but then have some kind of mental breakdown that this isn't better managed. And I think the people in America, ordinary people in America, I'm not talking about government, MIC and all that stuff, ordinary people in America deserve better. And that was the only reason I wanted to say this. There's a small community with at least 16 and possibly 22 or 25 people dead. And that will affect, I mean, I live in a city of 4 million. And if 25 people were killed last night in this city, it would be devastating. This is 4 million people. And I think the city that this happened in doesn't even have 1 million. So I'm guessing that pretty much everybody knows somebody who's been a victim of this. If they don't know somebody, they'll know somebody who knows somebody. It's that kind of place. And
I'm not sure Maine as a whole has 1 million people. It's a very small state population-wise, but it's really horrifying what a problem this is in the United States. I think the statistics are that there are 2 or 3 mass shootings, meaning more than one person gets shot at the same time in the United States every single day. And I forget the exact figure, but close to 10,000 people a year are murdered. So yeah, it's just
it's the 10,000 figure is the number that the police on average kill. The
well, about
actual number,
a little over 1,000 are killed by the police, which
sorry,
yeah.
1,000. There's over 100,000 a year are killed
No, I'd have
by
to
gun.
check the exact figure, but it's around 10,000
Are
homicides
you
and
yeah,
a
are you
little more than
talking?
that suicides.
Yeah,
Or
there's a lot of suicides, but it's you've got a gun epidemic. That's the problem, and it is. I mean, the numbers. I've written about this in the past. The numbers are over 100,000 people die of gunshots. Now, believe this or not, some of them are the lucky ones because they don't get stiffed with the hospital bills, and you have 400.
22,941 in 2021.
How
So
many?
just 22,000, almost
Is
23,000
that homicides or gun deaths?
homicides. So
There you go.
yeah,
So the suicides
bit
take it
over.
up to 100,000. The justifiable homicides, if there is ever such a thing, that's an Americanism. The justifiable homicide, they don't have that law in the UK and Australia. They have murder or manslaughter, and that's it. This thing that they have in America, justifiable homicide, when you're defending yourself, is different.
Yeah.
Anyway, that number would be higher as well. I mean, we are talking 100,000 people die of gunshots, and I don't know how many. I mean, last night, just this one event, we're talking at least. I mean, who knows? It could be 80. It could be higher. This guy is still at large, so it could even go higher.
Yeah,
But at the
right.
moment,
Crazy.
the police advice is to shelter at home, arm yourself. I mean, does everyone in Maine have a gun? That
A lot of people do. A lot of hunters there. So, yeah, many
okay,
people have a
right,
gun.
right, okay.
Looks
So
like
arm
about
yourself, shelter.
50,000 suicides a year, and most of those are gun deaths.
There you go.
So, yeah, tens of thousands at any rate. It's just a terrible problem that you don't have anywhere near that level in any other in any Western country, and certainly not in China. But oh shoot, I'm sorry. Let me cut that off. I accidentally hit that. Um, yeah, I mean, it dropped for a while in the 90s when we had a ban on assault weapons, but uh, you know, once that went out, people became capable of killing people at a much higher rate if they were so inclined. And it's just a weird thing. I mean, I don't understand. Yeah, it's basically suicide, right? Because you're going to get shot if you're going around
What they
shooting
call that,
people.
suicide by cop.
Yeah, yeah. Just, I mean, I can't fathom this idea of just murdering complete strangers. It's a bizarre problem that we have.
Well, since I'm in China and I'm a China commentator, I'm going to tell you that 2018 was the last gun death in China. And it was a police officer shooting someone who was using a vehicle to kill people. And he had already killed people and was driving towards other people, and the police officer shot him dead. Now, shot him. I'm not sure if he died, shot him. But let's leave it at that because I didn't follow up on that story. But that was 2018. And before that, there was one in 2017. So that would be called a spate of gun deaths in China.
Yeah.
And we don't have guns. People do not have guns. Some police have guns, not many. And they have an organization called the People's Armed Police. And you can see them quite clearly when you see them. They're usually, they're all in black. We call them the Kevlar cops. And they drive around. They have vehicles that kind of are armored personnel carriers. You don't see them very often, but when you do see them, you know who they are. You just don't know why they're there. It's very, very strict gun laws. China, FLU says China has strict gun control. There's virtually no guns in China. And there was a situation where a drunken police officer shot somebody in an argument. And that, I think, was about 2015. He's still in prison.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just mind-boggling the difference between the U.S. and you do have this sort of problem in some countries in the global south where there's just a lot of violence
Yeah.
anyway. But I mean, typically though, homicides in countries where there's a big homicide problem are like, they have death squads or something like that. As opposed to here where the main problems are, well, I guess the number one problem is probably gang violence, but then very close second and third are homicides committed by the police, and these crazy mass shootings, and of course a lot of domestic violence as well.
You also have mass shootings are defined as 3 people shot. They don't have to die. 3 people shot.
Right.
And I think you have on more than on average 1 a day in the United States. Now, honestly, when you're starting to get into that position, then you really do have a problem. The United States life expectancy decreased last year and the year before. People are living less.
Mainly because of COVID.
Mainly because of COVID, no doubt. But when you have 100,000 or more than 100,000 drug overdose deaths, you have 100,000 gun deaths. There's 200,000 people who add to that statistic, and all avoidable, just with some proper laws, proper enforcement of proper laws.
Yeah. Well, I mean, including decriminalizing it and making sure that people know what they're getting when they do get powerful drugs. That that's a lot of these deaths are accidental because people don't really know what they're taking, and it is more than what they think, or it's something that they don't know they're taking. Many committing suicide from debt. Yeah, that's a problem for sure.
Committing suicide from cop, I think, is what they mean, isn't it?
No, debt, as in can't pay your bills.
I thought you said death. Sorry. Debt is a problem, and it's less of a problem here. I've got a little statistic for you. Do you know this? This is a fantastic statistic, slightly unrelated, where you're talking about debt. During COVID, Chinese people put $2.2 trillion into their savings accounts.
Wow.
$2.2 trillion into their savings account. And there are only, I think, 7 countries in the world that have a higher GDP than that. That's the amount of savings Chinese people have. So there's a little less of that kind of issue, that debt issue. So it's something.
And in contrast to that, during the pandemic here, I mean, there was enough aid so that most people made it, but the rate of failures of small businesses was just astronomical. And my girlfriend and I are vegans, and so we go to vegan restaurants sometimes, and a lot of our favorite restaurants have gone under. Largely because the pandemic so badly hurt their business.
We had the same situation here. A lot of small businesses, a lot of small retailers, they closed down. And what did happen was as retailers closed down, so the e-market built up. So a lot of people kind of adjusted and are making money on the internet. But you can still, to this day, you can walk down some streets and find that there are more shops closed than there are open. But that doesn't mean everybody's in debt. It just means that they're not working in those shops anymore. And there has been a spike in unemployment. We heard about the spike in youth unemployment in particular. But then, of course, they took that statistic out of context because it was June when they told us that it was spiked. Well, of course, it spikes in June. That's when everyone graduates. It's normal. Yeah.
Well, I mean, from an economic perspective, it's certainly understandable that China, roughly a year ago, went "quote unquote" back to normal as far as COVID policy. But I really do wish, as I've said before when we've talked, that they had put some money into, and other countries as well, because hardly anybody's done this, put some money into just cleaning up the air like we did a century ago with the water. And reducing the rate of transmission of disease that way. Because I mean, I've read stats something like 95% reduction in transmission of airborne infections if you have the air well filtered and the rooms well ventilated and so forth.
There you go.
So
there's your answer.
Yeah.
At least for the next time. Maybe they'll be prepared next time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly a conversation that needs to be had so we can indeed be prepared for the next time. But not that is it still this time. We just don't notice as much because it's not talked about.
Oh yeah, COVID's still around. I had it just a month ago, like a second time.
Oh no, second time. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but it was very mild. It was no worse than a standard cold. I've been jabbed 3 times with the Sinovac thing. Yeah. So it's inactive. It's not the mRNA, whatever. It's not that one. But I caught it again. I was in Beijing and I came home with a bit of a sore throat. 2 days later, I was down. But I wasn't out at any stage. I was just down.
Yeah. Well, I like not being sick, so I'm still doing the mask wearing thing. But anyway, it seems like the third shot is pretty important for kind of or more for maximizing your level of protection.
I'm still not a great believer in that because it's a virus that constantly mutates. I think probably the best.
But in terms of protecting, making sure that it isn't severe. I mean, not that it guarantees that, because it just reduces the likelihood that you're going to get a severe disease, including reducing the likelihood of long COVID, but definitely by tremendously decreasing the likelihood of acute disease severe enough that you're going to wind up in the hospital. So especially for us.
How did we get onto COVID when we were talking about mass shooting?
Well, I mean, you were talking. There was a way that it logically followed, but anyway, since we've now got 60 people here or so, do we want to start moving toward our main topic for the night?
I'm with you. Okay. Go with.
All right. So as presumably everyone who's watching knows, but by the way, the banner scrolling across the bottom says, please like and subscribe to boost us in the algorithm. That goes for both my channel and Jerry's channel if you haven't already. And, I in particular need the boost because as of the time this show started, I was just short of 300 subscribers. So I really want to grow so I can talk to more people when we do these events. So please do that. Anyway, so the main thing we wanted to talk about tonight was the recent escalation in the Israel-Palestine conflict, where on October 7th, a militant group in the Gaza Strip, which is a little strip of land along the coast in southwest, Palestine, bordering Israel and Egypt, Hamas and a number of other armed groups in Gaza launched a attack in Israel, aimed primarily at military bases and installations, and took Israel completely by surprise, despite Israel's vaunted intelligence and surveillance capacities, and did a heck of a lot of damage. But the way this was framed in the West was all those terrorists killed so many civilians, and the focus was exclusively on civilian deaths, which there were quite a few. According to Israeli government figures, overall something like 1,400 people, Israelis were killed. Obviously lots of Palestinian fighters as well, and roughly 400 or 500, I think, were. Out of the ones that they've identified so far, which is about 800, roughly half of them were military and the other half were civilians. And there were eyewitness accounts that pointed to different things having happened. For instance, there were eyewitness accounts suggesting that some Palestinian fighters had intentionally fired into crowds or targeted civilians. There were also eyewitness accounts indicating that Israel had also, the IDF had also fired into crowds including because there were people, both mainly military, but also civilians, captured by the Palestinian fighters, and Israel knew that. But despite knowing that, they were firing everything they had, including tank shells, at houses or whatever where these Palestinians with their captives were holed up. So a lot of people died that way, or died in the crossfire between the two forces, but that doesn't get talked about in the Western narrative. Is all of those Palestinians, Hamas is nothing but terrorists. That's their sole objective, is to kill innocent people. And in fact, both after this and throughout Israel's entire 75-year history, there's absolutely no doubt that time and time again, Israel has deliberately targeted civilians, and the calamity that's unfolding right now in Gaza is just horrific. Israel has completely cut off basically every essential supply from Gaza: food, water, medicine, fuel, and electricity. Just completely, well, almost completely gone. The only reason there's a trickle is because of some international pressure, but it's not nearly enough. And in addition, Israel's carpet bombing just throughout the Gaza Strip. The figure I saw today is that so far something like 7,000 people are dead in Gaza from the bombing, and 1.4 million have been rendered homeless. So it's just horrifying. It's genocide.
I saw an international barrister on the BBC yesterday. Now, there's an admission. I was watching the BBC. I don't very often, and she was talking about, in terms of international law, forget about humanitarian stuff, but in terms of the way the law is written. And now, please, if anyone's going to jump in and say, Jerry's supporting the wrong side, I'm not supporting anything here. I'm just stating what this lady said. She said that in terms of international law, Israel is quite entitled to block everything going into Gaza if they believe that any of it is finding its way into Hamas's hands. Now,
that's totally not true.
Oh, well, under international law, I mean, she's a barrister. I'm not going to argue that she's telling a lie or she's wrong. Her interpretation as a barrister who studies international law, if goods are getting into that area and Hamas is getting some of them, then Israel are within their rights. Now, that's one aspect. And I can accept that. I don't agree with it. Okay. I can accept it. Then she said, the same thing applies with the bombing. If they are aware that Hamas are in a building, wait, bear me out here, because I can see you champing at the bit. If Hamas are in a building, if terrorists are in a building, they would need to take into account the collateral damage, and they are quite entitled under international law to take out that building. And it's not collective punishment. It is destroying a nest of terrorists as they are defined. And then the innocent deaths there are collateral damage, which are acceptable under international law. Now, having said all of that, what I would say was, what kind of person says, okay, there's a family of 20 people living in there and there's 2 terrorists underneath that house, let's destroy the house? What kind of mentality does that? And the fact is, self-defense is about defending your own property. It's not about going outside of your garden fence and shooting people. Defending your own property is, and they've done it already, they've built a fence to keep people out. Whatever happened, how did they, this was what was going through my mind as I was watching this. Okay, so they now know which house is housing Hamas terrorists.
They don't. And
how the hell would they know that if they didn't even know that Hamas was coming across in their thousands?
Exactly.
I mean, this is a navy that consists of rubber motorboats, an air force that consists of paragliders, and infantry troops that consists of mostly probably teenage and some younger adult kids who have got themselves some guns provided by a third party.
Yeah.
How did they not know this was happening when they do know that inside of that house or underneath that house where 10 people or 20 people or 30 people are living, there are terrorists? How do they know this when they didn't know that? It just beggars belief to me.
It makes no sense whatsoever. And Hamas and other groups have dug a huge network of tunnels that's something like half the size of New York subway system in terms of mileage. Underneath, and throughout Gaza, and that's presumably how they got weapons and material to get weapons. And maybe bulldozers. I don't know where they got the bulldozers from to cut through the fence. They're able to get in and out of Egypt, etc., and obviously in and out of Israel through these tunnels. And Israel has no idea exactly where these tunnels are. They're very deep underground. They're so far underground that about the only way that Israel could take most of them out is to nuke Gaza. Even the bunker buster bombs that the U.S. is giving Israel don't penetrate deeply enough. My tax dollars and other Americans' tax dollars, to the tune of about $2 billion, went to building Israel's wall and fence, around Gaza. Basically Gaza's, it's a prison, basically, or a concentration camp. I mean, literally, because people are not permitted to go out, even if they've got a medical condition that they can't get treated in Gaza, there's like a 50-50 chance they won't let them out. And, so
I think we need to put that into some perspective from a legal standpoint, the difference between a prison and a concentration camp. In a prison, everybody who's in there, apart from the guards, has been convicted of an offense, or at least charged with an offense if they're on remand, and they're potentially guilty of an offense. Now, let's not get down the track of, but somebody was convicted, wrongly convicted. There has been a conviction or there has been a charge for a crime, and people know they have a date on which they're going to get out. That's what a prison is. A concentration camp, invented by the British during the Boer War, was where they took people who have done nothing wrong and they corralled them into a place where they could control them. That's what they did to the families of the Boers that they were fighting in the Boer War. So the British invented this system, the Germans refined it, and I think it looks like the Israelis have perfected it. This is not a prison. Let's not call it an open prison. That's the wrong terminology. This is a concentration camp in the truest sense of the word. We're concentrating as many people into one place so that we can control them. That is what's happening there. There's no argument about that. I think even under international law, I would argue that with the barrister who might tell me that it's wrong because, but the fact is, there's a wall around it. They can't get in or out of it. There's no work for 46% of them are 60-something% of them are unemployed and living in poverty. They're relying very much on international aid just to survive. That's not life.
As Robert A. says here in the comments, prisoners are fed and watered, Palestinians are not. And even since Gaza was walled off and settlements were set up all around it after Israel withdrew settlers from Gaza, and military checkpoints and bases everywhere. Israeli government officials called it putting Gazans on a diet. They literally counted out how many calories worth of food they would have to ship into Gaza in order to just keep people barely alive. And that's how much they allowed in. And it's been that way for, 16 years now, until recently when Israel just cut everything off.
I made the point in a video I posted yesterday or the day before where I said Palestinians didn't wake up one morning and say, I know what I'm going to do today. I'm going to learn how to become a terrorist.
Yeah.
They had something happen to them. somebody has died, somebody has been killed, somebody has been murdered, somebody close to them something has happened that has turned them into someone who hates the person or people responsible for this. Now, you can argue all you like about the methodology that they use being terrorists, but they didn't become terrorists out of choice. That's probably that's the greatest factor that people are missing here. Anybody who's thinking about this, Hamas are terrorists. Why? Why are they terrorists? Oh, because they're evil. Why are they evil? Oh, because they just kill people indiscriminately. Why do they kill people indiscriminately? Well, what happened to them to make them do that? That's where we that's the point we're forgetting when we talk about Hamas, and when they're defined as terrorists. I say, well, Mao Zedong was a terrorist to some Chinese people. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. He was a hero. Well, because he won.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I mean, I'm working on an article now called "Did Nat Turner Start It?" Because you always hear this talk among pro-Israel people. Well, Hamas started it as an excuse for Israel doing these horrible genocidal things they're doing to Palestinians right now. And it's like, well, first of all, no, actually, Jewish settlers from Europe started it, so to speak, back in the early 1900s, and then it escalated in 1948 when Israel was formed, and over 750,000 Palestinians were kicked off their land, and thousands and thousands of them were murdered, and so on and so forth. And that's continued.
Can I just raise a point? I saw a point in the question in the comments a little while ago that said a Christian. I'm sorry, I didn't see who did this, and I can't bring this up to the screen either.
Okay,
a Christian told this guy that the Israelis bought the land, and now the Palestinians want it back because they've seen that the Israelis are able to cultivate it. They're doing good stuff with it. They've turned it into an oasis in the desert, as it were. And now the Israelis want it back. The Arabs want it back.
It's just a horribly racist comment, frankly.
I don't know. I don't. Well, let's go back to the first part of that comment. Did Israel pay for the land?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think so. But it's like you can't just go into land that people have been living on for generation after generation and start murdering them and threatening them and forcing them to leave and just stealing their land. But for the most part, people in Palestine did own their own homes and land, and they had the title to it and everything. In cases where that was formalized, and they were just driven out. Hundreds of thousands just in 1948 alone, and many people since then. And right now they're trying to, if they get their way, they're going to try to push 2.3 million Gaza residents out of the west, out of Gaza entirely, into Egypt or the Sinai Desert or whatever, and take over their land. That's what they want to do. That if you look at compare maps of territory set aside for Israel versus the Palestinians in 1947 onward, the UN partition gave 60% of the land in Palestine to the Jewish settlers, and only 40% reserved for Arabs who were more numerous. And it has just gradually shrunk over the years from something like 40% of the territory to basically about well under 10% of the territory supposedly belonging to Palestinians, and they don't even control that, because in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, where the majority of the Palestinian population lives, there's like military checkpoints everywhere, armed settlers everywhere who, by the way, even though Hamas doesn't exist in the West Bank, those settlers have killed over 100 Palestinians just this month. And then in Gaza, of course, as we've talked about, it's a concentration camp. Basically, you can't get out. So
Seymour has made an interesting point here that there are many Jews protesting this.
Yeah. If you look up Katie Halper's account, Katie is a independent journalist who is ethnically Jewish. She does a great podcast, but she on her Twitter or X account had a list of Jewish people and organizations who are against the Israeli government policies, and it was quite long. A list of just a list of prominent people and organizations who are against. And I don't know what the percentage is, but it's at least a significant minority of Jews in the United States, want nothing to do with what Israel is doing. And even as we've talked about in Israel, at this point, quite a few people are upset at Netanyahu and his government.
I think they were upset with Netanyahu before the October the 7th.
Sure. But even more so now.
It looked like he was struggling. He had struggled to get some fairly stiff laws that would control Israelis that were kind of not wanted. And then, of course, the war, let's call it a war. The war happened, and then he was able to immediately get them through Parliament, which is something that he wanted to do, and that's really upset the local population. So he's not a very popular prime minister now.
Yeah, something like 20% approval rating. Somebody asked in the comments, General, I always forget the name of the Jewish Orthodox group, which is far more peaceful than people in Israel. It's I think it's Hasidic Jews, and you can tell by the way they dress that they're Jewish. That kind of
with the black hats and
and beards and so forth. And this congressman in New York, Richie Torres, has been he's totally bought off by the Israeli lobby, and he's constantly accusing everyone and his brother and sister of being anti-Semitic if they dare to criticize anything about the Israeli government. And so today he had a comment, going on in the same vein and basically almost equating being Jewish with being a Zionist. Well, Zionists meaning people who support, basically a Jewish ethno-state in Palestine, where Jews control everything. And it was pointed out to him, well, first of all, in the United States, probably most Zionists are fundamentalist Christians, not Jews. And secondly, I mean, in his comment, he had a video clip of a protest outside his office, and look at these anti-Semites.
I saw that.
Well, at the forefront of the protest were these Hasidic Jews, and calling them anti-Semitic. They hate themselves. What is this?
Well, on Palestinian Semitic as well.
True. Yes. Yeah.
So how can I another of my comments that I made? If I criticize Israel, I'm anti-Semitic. If I criticize Hamas, I'm anti-Palestine. Well, that's not quite the same. Now, there's one other thing that I need to kind of, if I can, correct. If not correct, at least put into perspective again. This is not, according to Israel, this is not an Israeli-Palestinian war. This is an Israeli-Hamas war. But then it begs the question, why are they bombing places that Hamas don't exist? They've bombed the Golan Heights, which is Syria. They've bombed parts of Egypt. They've bombed Aleppo airport. I don't know if that was a mistake. They've had a bomb hit Egypt and injure some Egyptian border guards.
They've even bombed the West Bank, where Hamas doesn't exist.
They have already bombed the West Bank during this conflict, where Hamas apparently does not exist. So, what is this? Is this a Palestinian or a Hamas war? That's a question rather than a correction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it isn't just Hamas. There are other armed groups in Gaza, and also apparently quite a few civilians went across the border when the part of the defense came down. Some of them were armed, so who knows, like who did what. But Yeah, I mean, again, there's this tunnel network, which is presumably where the vast majority of Gaza's people are. And so, when Israel is bombing, indiscriminately neighborhoods and hospitals and schools and churches and firing on ambulances, assassinating journalists, they're not targeting Hamas; they're targeting everybody in Gaza.
Yeah. So if this, there was talk yesterday of gassing those tunnels, and
Yeah, completely
a few
impractical.
comments. Oh, look, the Jews are going to use gas chambers. I mean, yeah. That's probably an anti-Semitic joke. But the fact is, if they're even thinking about that, where would innocent people who are being bombed go to hide? They would go as deep into the ground as they could. If they've got basements, if they've got tunnels under their houses, that's where they're going to go in order to hide. And surely, if they're going to gas these tunnels, they're going to be gassing many people.
Yeah, well, I mean, the tunnels are ventilated and they've got doors at many points in between different compartments, and it's such a vast network of tunnels that it's just a completely impractical idea to begin with. Let alone, the amount of fighting and the number of troops they would lose just in order to get to the tunnels, and then to work their way through the tunnels while they're carrying this poisonous stuff. It's just a completely impractical idea, not to mention completely immoral if they did manage to take out a bunch of people. But
according to the article, the U.S. Navy would be helping them.
Doesn't matter. Let's see. Scott Ritter has talked. I'm thinking of military experts who've talked about this. Scott Ritter and
Brian Beletic,
the guy on electronic intifada, which has been doing a live stream throughout this conflict every other day, and I highly recommend that people follow them. And I forget his name.
The new Atlas, Brian Beletic is brilliant.
Brian Beletic, yes, yes, definitely follow him. But yeah, they've basically debunked this idea that this would be a quote unquote final solution for the Hamas problem. It can't.
Trevor Norman in the UK. It's 2:00 in the morning there, and he's still up. Thanks, Trevor. Have a look at who funded Hamas to try and get rid of the I think it was the PLA, wasn't it? Or the
PLA? There's a bit of I forget what the term is for when the Democrats tried to make sure that Trump would be the nominee in 2016. But they tried to the Pied Piper strategy. Yeah, that's it. They figured, well, if we've got somebody who's at least to non-Republicans indisputably horrible, we'll have an easier time winning. And obviously that backfired completely on them. But I mean, Hamas, whatever you think of their views, I mean, like a lot of people in Palestine, they're kind of religious fundamentalists and don't like gay people and so on and so forth. But unlike their opposition in the 2006 election, which is when they got in, they had a reputation for being honest, and that's why they won close election and have been in power since then. And they also, like everybody else in Gaza, wanted to break out of their prison, and so that's what concentration camp. So that's what they tried to do. And I was saying a few minutes ago, I was working on an article. Did Nat Turner start it? And Nat Turner was the leader of a famous rebellion against slavery in the United States in 1831, and they went on a rampage around various plantations and basically killed everybody they could find, men, women, and children, killed about 70 people. And of course they were caught and executed. But much as is happening in with Israel and Gaza now, they not only killed those people, but they killed a bunch of other slaves who had nothing to do with it, and lynched hundreds of other black people afterwards, to try and intimidate people from rising up again, which of course didn't work. But anyway, my point was, if you look at history and you look at armed opposition if you look at opposition to whatever, slavery or colonial occupation or whatever, you very, very often find cases of groups committing terrorism, killing innocent civilians, and bombings, or whatever the case may be. And so, I mean, of course, most of us would condemn that particular tactic, both on moral grounds and practically speaking in terms of winning popular support. But that doesn't have anything to do with the overall justice of their cause. That it's just to fight against slavery. It's just to fight against colonial occupation, and in fact, the right to armed resistance is enshrined in international law. Against a colonial power, an occupying military power. So.
Yeah, I mean that's another aspect that is completely forgotten in the Gazan conflict, that they have a right to defend themselves too.
Exactly.
And if they're prisoners in a concentration camp, surely international law says you have a right to break out. How do you break out without killing people? Now,
exactly.
I don't know what international law says on it, but if you're in a concentration camp, I'm quite certain you have some protected rights under international law. And that needs to be addressed. I mean, right now, we seem to be getting, and this is a really interesting point, all of the media, all of the Western governments, the Anglosphere governments, are all in favor of supporting Israel defending itself. All of the people that I'm seeing on Twitter and on TV and in the country, so hundreds of thousands came out in London. Hundreds of thousands came out in London in protest, in support of Palestine. And yet the government is sitting in Parliament saying, we're 100%. Britain is behind Israel. Well, the people are saying, no, we're not. We seem to have these two different, it's a dichotomy. We've got the people in a democracy saying, we're not supporting Israel. And we've got the democracy, the democratic elected leaders saying we are. Something's gone wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's more complicated than that, because if you look at opinion polls, basically the propaganda has worked. The majority of people say they support, what Israel is doing. According to
not in the UK, 85% were polled that said we don't.
In where?
UK.
In where? Oh, okay. Well, in the United States, it's something like 70%. Either slightly or strongly support the Israeli side at this point in time. There's a reason for that. It's just like wall-to-wall pro-Israel coverage in the corporate media. And in fact, the various networks where they are on, benched, so to speak, their hosts who were Muslim. Like three Muslim news commentators in the United States are, at least off of any prominent position, for now.
This is interesting. I mean, it's not a discussion about free speech. It's a discussion about balance in reporting. So free speech is one thing, but if you are media, the word media means middle. You should have some balance. And really, they haven't. They're basically saying we don't want a counter argument to our narrative. In the United Kingdom, there's the online safety bill, which effectively says if you disagree with the government in a public forum, then you commit an offense. It will need interpretation when it gets to the courts. It's only just been implemented. It hasn't been tested in the courts yet. But it effectively says that if you disagree with us, when we put a narrative out, if you go against that narrative, which I do all the time, and I'm a British citizen, so if I go back to the United Kingdom, I could be picked up and charged under the online safety bill, which was really just recently, very recently, 3 or 4 weeks ago, implemented in the UK. So they're not looking for balance. They're certainly not giving freedom of speech, but really in media, it should have that balance, which we're not getting. You didn't get it on Ukraine, Russia. You're not getting it on Israel-Palestine.
Check this out. In both France and Germany, they have tried to outlaw pro-Palestinian rights protests. And in Germany, the government was arresting the German government was arresting Jewish protesters against Germany's support for
Not the
Israel.
first time the German government have done that.
Yeah. It's totally unprecedented, right? Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, literally, and of course in Ukraine too. The German government is literally supporting Nazis. It's who would have thought?
Surprise.
Yeah. I know what I was going to say. I mentioned the article that I'm working on, which basically points out, people have a right to armed resistance, and sometimes when oppressed people engage in armed resistance, some of them commit atrocities, against civilians, and that's unfortunate, but it doesn't obviously invalidate their cause of gaining their freedom. And I also got an article published in this blog called a site called Savage Minds a couple of weeks ago, which I hadn't previously heard of, but they've had a lot of good coverage on this issue. So I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a try. So I got an article published there recently, and the title is oh shoot. Where is...
Bring it up in the banners.
I'm looking for present. Oh, sorry, looking in the wrong place. Share screen. Oh, do I not? Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, this is an interesting one that Robert just put up. Blinken has warned Qatar to soften Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, there's my article. Atrocity that I got published like last week. Atrocity propaganda, mass rape allegations weaponized to demonize Palestinians, and so that was one allegation that had no basis. Even the IDF, the Israeli military, said they didn't know of any evidence that there were rapes that occurred during the October 7th uprising. And
were there beheaded babies?
No. In fact, if you look at the statistics published in Haaretz on deaths of Israelis that have been identified by name, and whether they were military or not, and other stuff, there's nobody under age 4 listed as having died.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were literally 0 babies that even died, much less that were beheaded. Meanwhile,
40 of them.
Yeah, let alone 40 of them. And meanwhile, in Gaza, there have been, I don't know how many babies, but there have been about 3,000 children. Yeah, about 3,000 or so children have been killed, many of them babies. And yes, in fact, when you drop bombs on people, often you do behead them. So there are a lot of beheaded babies in Gaza, but not among the Israelis. At least not so far.
So we can add this to the list of weapons of mass destruction: the Gulf of Tonkin, the Viagra rapes, the gassing of their own people.
Yeah,
all this stuff is just made up, put into the news, creates our horror, and we say, well, we've got to destroy the people who are doing this. Consent for war, manufacturing. I think that was Noam Chomsky's phrase. Manufacturing consent for war. That's what they're doing. In other words, Robert, unverified. Nothing is verified, and until it's verified, we had the CNN reporter crying on television. I've heard people saying, "I saw beheaded babies," and now
Joe Biden said that.
From Israel's. Sorry,
Joe Biden said that. He lied. He said he's seen it.
Oh, he's seen photographs of and then they walked that back. We haven't actually seen that, but as FU says, people buy it.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, there are also real atrocities, but even there's total bias where um, whatever the side that we don't like does, we only talk about that, and we ignore what the side that our government does like does. And as far as the mass rape allegations in particular, what comes to mind is that on one hand, we have no evidence for that, on the part of the Palestinian militants, and on the other hand, you routinely see stories in the Israeli press about soldiers or prison guards raping Palestinians that typically haven't committed any crime, but they're imprisoned because of their views or because they're suspected of having dissident views or whatever. And they're raped and tortured and so forth. And the Western media doesn't talk about that.
Well, again, Western media does talk about this kind of stuff, but where do they get it from? They get it from Hamas, and how much of that is true? So we've got atrocity propaganda on both sides, I'm sure.
No.
You don't think so?
No, there have been stories published in the Israeli press about rape being a problem in Israel, and other certainly a lot of independent media outlets too. But yeah, it's not coming from Hamas.
Well, it's being amplified in Western media when it's seen.
Yeah.
Now, there's another aspect that we don't consider here is that there are Israeli media who are against Israel's actions. So,
well, no, I'm not sure I would go that far. There are some mainstream Israeli media outlets that sometimes report things accurately. From what I've seen, Haaretz seems to be
mainstream.
About that. Okay, yeah, and obviously there are dissident groups in Israel as well. And the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem seems fairly balanced and even-handed. They've called Israel an apartheid state and documented all the ways in which it is. As have the best known human rights groups, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, which are actually quite pro-Western in their bias. They're based in the United States, and yet they still say Israel is committing the crime of apartheid and document all the ways in which it is. So it's not like there aren't objective people saying that. In fact, there are people who are biased, against the Palestinians, pretty much still saying Israel's in the wrong here. Oh, thanks for coming, F. Lou. I'm glad you could make it out. And anyway, see you next time.
Now there are 4.
We've got 78 right now showing on StreamYard. I'm not sure how many if you look at Twitter or YouTube, but yeah, pretty good sized audience. Okay, so yeah, atrocity propaganda, big problem. And what I was struck by about this was, as you know from our previous conversations, one of the issues I've been involved in for many years is women's rights, and I've recently been involved with the fight for female-only spaces in sports and so forth. And as you might guess, this mass rape allegation was bought lock, stock, and barrel by most feminists who, for the most part, don't know beans about foreign policy, so they don't really understand the Israel-Palestine situation, and so most of them are on Israel's side, while meanwhile Israel is committing genocide, and it's just horrifying to see this. But you have the opposite problem too. You have people who understand the Palestine situation very well, but who think that if a man says he's a woman, then you should say, yes, you are, and permit him to go into rape shelters and so on and so forth. So I think I've come to the conclusion over the last few years that very, very few of us are informed enough about a broad spectrum of issues to not have terrible positions on some issues. I've seen that over and over again, even among people who are presumably well-intentioned.
Yeah, the one thing I'm pleased about living in China is I don't have to cope with that. I don't have to. I mean, there's no danger whatsoever of me misgendering someone, because
Mm-hmm.
if I do misgender someone, they'll just tell me. No one will
Yeah.
feel violated or
Yeah. Yeah.
assaulted by that. It is possible, and there are a lot of. We actually see a lot of girls who look like boys rather
Mm-hmm.
than boys who look like girls. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
we see them and I just don't notice them. I don't know the reality of this, and I don't know the statistics, but there are a lot of gay families, gay couples here. Not couples with children, but a lot of gay couples, lots. And we don't have to worry about that aspect of it. It's not talked about at all. I'm not suggesting that it isn't a problem. It's just not talked about as a problem. Yeah, I was going to talk about this meme. This is where Palestine has kind of disappeared, hasn't it? Over
Yeah.
the
Yeah. I mean, just incredible what's happened. And of course, they would like to make the green disappear entirely. And they make no bones about saying that that's what they want to do. They want to take over all the land and push the Palestinians out and make it a strictly Jewish state. But you know, it isn't necessarily talked about that much here in the West. Um, but yeah, it's and obviously in order to do that, as with any occupying power, as my country did to Native Americans, you've got to massacre a lot of people in order to carry that out. Do
same thing in
everything else,
Australia
like
too.
stealing their resources and cutting off their food sometimes, and so on and so forth. Which is exactly what the Nazis did to people that they weren't actually putting in the concentration camps. Is they would surround ghettos and cut off their food. And that's exactly what Israel is doing to the Gaza ghetto.
Kevin James Wu in Mandarin has just made a
Yeah.
comment. The Palestinian issue is like the Japanese invasion of China.
Yeah.
I had a guy the other day when I put out a tweet about Gaza being very similar to the Warsaw Ghetto in a
Yeah.
sense. And this guy came back to me and he said something like, so you are aware that you're comparing China to Gaza here? No, I'm not. And basically he said the Japanese invaded China,
Right.
and then millions of innocent Japanese, suffered as a result of it.
Innocent Chinese, yeah. Uh-huh.
No, he said innocent Japanese suffered as a
What?
result of it. Wait a moment here. The
Well, I mean,
Japanese soldiers, the military invaded China, and a lot of them died in the defense of China. What you're talking about, the millions of Japanese people who died were killed by Americans in a nuclear bomb that wasn't actually necessary. What convoluted mind starts to think like this? That the invasion of China by Japan can be equated to the invasion of Gaza by Israel. It's not possible. The invasion of the takeover, the absorption of Gaza by Israel can be linked as a similarity. I can get that, but the retaliation, he says, Hamas attacking Israel is the same as China attacking Japan. Well, China never attacked Japan. It never sent troops to Japan, and it never slaughtered innocents, whereas innocents in China were very much slaughtered.
Right.
Very strange, convoluted argument.
Yeah, but that brings to mind that certainly I would certainly assume in Imperial Japan, and I know for a fact in Israel, like you're required, if you're a male back then, and regardless of sex now in Israel, to join the military. Some people manage to conscientiously object, but the vast majority don't. Just because they're in the IDF doesn't necessarily mean they're war criminals. And same thing, on both sides. Like, just because there are people in Hamas that have committed war crimes, or people in the IDF who have committed all war crimes, that doesn't mean they all are responsible for these atrocities. So, got to keep people's
Yeah.
humanity.
Anyway, were we going to talk about Ukraine as well? Because I have to finish before 9:30 my time. My wife has a live stream to go to,
Okay.
or an online conference, so we have to finish within 25 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I mean, in terms of Russia being, the vastly more powerful military power, things are pretty much going the same in Ukraine as they have been. Just gradually, the Ukrainian military's capacity to resist is being worn down, and Russia is capturing more territory. I haven't been following the intricate details that closely, but that's basically what's happening. But also, an interesting thing that's happened is that earlier in the Ukraine conflict, is at the behest of the United States, Israel sent quite a bit of ammunition, and I forget what else, to Ukraine for them to use in their war with Russia. And now Israel and the United States have decided they need it back.
Yeah.
So,
well, the ammunition's not coming back. That's for sure. It's being used. I'm sure. I'm certain that the ammunition.
No, a lot of it is being sent back, from what I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, but basically, I mean, the bottom line is that the West, NATO and so forth, didn't have the manufacturing capacity to, provide enough ammunition and weaponry for a protracted ground war, to provide that to Ukraine anyway. And now Israel needs it too. So, like, what's Israel going to do? They're not going to have enough material to launch a successful ground invasion into Gaza. Even putting aside how difficult that is to fight on enemy territory in an urban environment, in addition to the difficulty, of course, of most of the Hamas fighters being underground. Like, Israel totally has gotten its ass kicked the last few times it has sent troops in on the ground, in Lebanon, in what was it, 2000? I forget the exact year. In Gaza in 2006 and 2014. Israel hasn't had a lot of success with sending troops into places lately, and that's because Hamas has built up this tunnel network so vastly over the last few years, and also acquired more weaponry. It's going to be even tougher this time.
I read an article that said much of the material that Hamas used in the October the 7th came on the black market from Ukraine.
Interesting. Not surprising. Yeah, not surprising. I'll have to look into that. Not surprising at all. And, that's certainly the fact about the Ukrainian government that sticks out like a sore thumb is that we don't know where those hundreds of billions of dollars or whatever it is worth of aid we've sent to them are going. A lot of it's going to weaponry being sold on the black market. I think I.
What did you think about Kirby's comments the other day, where he said we are coming to the end of our rope as far as Ukraine? Did you see that comment? The funding of Ukraine has to, at some stage, come to a stop. Now, I know that Biden has just asked for 65 billion more, but John Kirby, the spokesperson, said that they're coming to the end of their rope. Now, I don't know if this was taken out of context, but that's what I heard, and I saw it. It's on X. It can be found. If anyone wants to Google this, Google Kirby end of rope. And Kirby comment.
I'll have to look
come
for
up.
that.
He actually made that.
I'm sure
comment.
Brian Berletic is on that because he's always covering what the U.S. government and Western press are stating about the conflict.
Another report that I saw yesterday. So Kevin's just asked, do I have a reference for that? The Ukrainian sold to Hamas. It was an article I read. I can't remember, but. Just Google that, Ukraine weapons used in Hamas attack, something like that. And I'm sure you'll find that people are suggesting it, whether it's definite or not, I don't know, but it's certainly been suggested, and I saw that. Then the next thing is that I was going to talk about was
we didn't finish talking about Kirby's comment.
I'm coming back to that.
Okay.
The next thing I was going to talk about in relation to Kirby's comment was another article I saw, which came from the former president of Ukraine's personal advisor, and it said that Zelensky has a helicopter standing by 24/7 in order to leave when he needs to leave. Now, that must, I would say, what we're seeing here, it could all be propaganda, of course, but it kind of indicates to me that we're getting to the end of the "we will support Ukraine to the end." That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing little snippets of things that indicate that Ukraine's, certainly they're out of the news because obviously Gaza is in the news. So they've moved off the front pages. They've moved off the opening page of every website in the world, and they've moved down. And consequently, they must be thinking, they must be feeling a little bit left out here. They're not getting. But Biden did just ask for $65 billion for Ukraine in his $106 billion request. But $4 billion of that was to counter China in the South Pacific as well.
I mean, obviously, at least at this point, until the U.S. ceases, the dollar ceases to be hegemonic as a currency, the U.S. can print however much money it wants. That's not the problem. The problem is, the lack of manufacturing capacity to provide sufficient weapons, and just the fact that there's no magic bullet weapon, so to speak, that's gonna change the outcome. I mean, Ukraine has lost so many trained military personnel. I think their casualties or deaths alone are like several 100,000. So they don't have the fighters and they obviously they have to train them on Western weapons, since the weapons they started the conflict off with were old Soviet era weapons for the most part. So that's a task in itself, and basically they're sending people to the front lines with very little training, or if they do get training, or if they have already had training, it's been with the wrong weapon systems up until now. They just don't have any weapons that are for the most part anyway, they don't have weapons that are at the same level as Russia's weapons. And I didn't know this before this conflict, but basically across the board, anti-aircraft weaponry, fighter planes, tanks, whatever, Russia's got the edge technologically, hypersonic missiles, you name it.
The best person I've seen to follow in relation to that is definitely the new Atlas, which is Brian Berletic.
Brian Berletic is great.
He's brilliant on brilliant on analyzing this stuff. Scott Ritter, I find, knows his stuff, but he's much more broader and more geopolitical. Brian gets down to the nuts.
Well, also the Duran is another great source. Alex and Alexander. I forget their last names. Also, speaking of weaponry, I just recently learned Iran has developed hypersonic missiles, and they've got, since the conflict started, they've put billboards around that's have a picture of one of their missiles, and it says something like 450 seconds to Tel Aviv. So they're saying, look, if Israel goes all out in this as far as a ground invasion or whatever, they could be looking at Tel Aviv being obliterated or something. So that, and also Hezbollah has a much more powerful military than Hamas does. So if it reaches that point that they decide to get involved in a major way, they could do a lot of damage in northern Israel. And it's like Ritter and Berletic and the others are saying there's no way Israel would be able to fight a two-front war.
Well, then now we've got America looking at a two-front war and a three-front war. They're still talking very, very strongly about, at some stage they believe that China will invade Taiwan, which is kind of ridiculous. I I saw I wrote an article about we have a missing submarine, which we don't. China doesn't have a missing submarine at all.
Yeah.
But some Western media are reporting that a submarine is missing or may be missing. They're not sure. But anyway, the story has no legs. But I wrote a report about it, and in there I found a quote from a Western expert on China's military buildup. And what he said was, and this is a direct quote. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, China is even building the wrong ships for their strategic purpose. And it made me stop and say, well, hang on a second. What's their strategic purpose? They're building the wrong ships for an invasion. Okay, so their strategic purpose, which they've stated time and time again, is not to ever invade Taiwan. They have no intention of ever invading Taiwan. They will defend Taiwan from being taken away, but they have never have had an intention of invading it. So their strategic purpose is the defense of Taiwan, not the attack of Taiwan. And they're building the wrong ships to attack Taiwan. So what he's saying is, we know what their intentions are, and they're building the wrong ships. But in fact, what he's saying is, we don't know what their intentions are. But if we looked at the ships they were building, we could assess what their intentions are, which are to defend, not to attack. So they're building a defensive navy. Nothing wrong with that. Every country in the world should have a defensive military. That's what China has.
Yeah, that would be nice. I didn't have a chance to look at how the live stream's looking on my channel until now, but I see I've only got 4 likes on my YouTube broadcast of this, and only 2 watching. So I'd like to ask people to do 2 things. The Bitter Pill broadcast of this, to subscribe to my channel, The Bitter Pill, and to also watch it from that channel, so that I can get a little help in terms of building my channel here, because I can tell you guys like our conversations, but I'd like to get something out of it here. So please help me out.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting to the point where I'm going to have to love you and leave you, because we have another thing going on at 9:30 in this house. Yeah. So let's have a wrap up. Where do we go next?
It's totally up in the air. I mean, it looks like Israel keeps putting off doing a ground invasion, because I think they can see how it might go for them, but then publicly they're saying, oh yeah, we're definitely going to do it. So who knows? Regardless, either way, I mean, Gaza has gone from having several hundred truckloads worth of aid coming in every day, food and water and so forth, because I mean their water purification plants have been destroyed by previous rounds of bombing by Israel, so they're dependent on the outside world for drinking water as well, and they're not getting it right now.
81% of Gazan water is unsuitable for drinking.
I heard it was over 90%, but anyway,
maybe
it's
now.
a lot.
Maybe now. Yeah.
So
can you, for the moment, can you take the Gaza map off, because it's kind of distracting? And
sure.
David can't find the Bitter Pill on YouTube, so you better type that one in as well.
Oh, okay, sure. Let's see.
In present, just remove on the stop sharing.
Yeah, okay, I'll get to that in a minute. I wanted to get my channel address. It's just at the Bitter Pill is the name of my channel. Here on YouTube, and I'm at Lefty Vegan on Twitter/X, and anyway, give it a like, and here, let me switch the view.
I've put them in the messages. There we go. That's just you now.
Oh,
You put me backstage. Now I'm back. I'm
yeah.
back just to say goodbye because we have 11 minutes for my wife to prepare for the next. She's got a video talk that she needs to attend at 9:30. So I'm
Okay.
going to have to say thank you
All
to
right.
everyone who joined in. Thanks for all the likes and the subscribes for the bitter pill. And
Yeah,
when
well, hopefully
we will
that'll
do this,
happen. I would really appreciate it, guys. Yeah, hit the like and also subscribe to my channel. I'd like to get well over 300 tonight. If you're pretty please, could do that. And really appreciate all the comments and all the people watching, and great conversation. And I put links to both Jerry's and my stuff that we've done on the Israel-Palestine conflict, or a lot of it anyway, in the description of the video. So look for that, under my channel, and go check out the links to both of our stuff.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everyone else. And we're going to do this once a month. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Let's try and see what we've got to talk about next month in about 3 weeks' time. We'll
okay.
get together.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everyone. But I really must rush off now.
Okay.
Bye for now.
All right. Bye, everybody.